In the last few days, we've seen reports about what could be the reduction in speed limits in South Africa. For the last while, the Road Traffic Management Corporation has been mooting the idea of lowering the speed limits by 10 kilometers per hour. The Department of Transport not saying much on this yet. It will first need to propose a Gazette proposed amendment, but we don't know yet. It is a suggestion that the Road Traffic Management Corporation has been suggesting for some time now. But would it work? Would a 10 kilometer per hour decrease in the speed limit affect what is a real crisis on our roads? Rob Handfield-Jones, MD of driving.co.za, road safety advocate in his own right. This idea being suggested for some time now. Why don't we lower the speed limit? In a 60 kilometer per hour, make it 50. In 100, make it 90. In 120, we lower to 110. Is there any suggestion, any evidence from other countries that lowering the speed limit actually works?
Morning, Lester. Yeah, it depends what you're looking at. One of our officials has popped up and said that this is in line with UN goals to reduce speed limits, but that's only partly true. If you look around the world, all the research that has ever been done on urban speed limits shows that lowering them is a good thing. From 60 to 50, there are definite safety benefits associated with that, and that stands to reason, because the urban areas are the areas where you do have more activity, and if you reduce average speed limits, drivers have more time to notice and react to hazards, and that's an uncontroversial finding which has been repeated the world over. Where it comes to higher speed limits, though, it's a different picture, and there's no evidence at all that reducing speed limits on high-speed roads leads to better safety. And in fact, some countries like Australia on their highest speed roads have actually increased speed limits recently, and they haven't noticed an increase in fatalities. And of course, the index cases, the German autobahns, which are limit-free in places, but are the safest high-speed roads in the world.
Currently, do we police our speed limits adequately?
Speed limits are about all we police, and it's often been something that I've said that in South Africa you can get away with anything as long as you don't break the speed limit. That is why we're not seeing any improvements in road safety, because speed is almost completely unrelated to road safety, except in a narrow urban context. What's related to road safety are moving violations. That's what you've got to police if you want to see a reduction in your incidents. And if you look at the successful countries which have got low incident rates, that's what they go after.
So lowering a speed limit essentially means a little cash injection for municipalities and metros.
Well, not a little cash injection. It's estimated to be a 1.5 billion rand a year industry. So you can understand why the government is hesitant to let go of it.
So what are the alternatives? Look, we also have to look at who uses our roads in South Africa. We have the phenomenon in South Africa where you could say there are four categories of road users. We have I'll use our national highways as an example. You have the freight industry, freight trucks. You have the transport, the taxis and the buses. You have passenger vehicles, but we also have pedestrians. So we have this phenomenon in South Africa where we have four entities, four groupings, or four classifications, all sharing a roadway, and I think that is what contributes. If you look at the statistics, a fair number of our road deaths are in fact people who are not even in cars, it's in fact pedestrians.
That's true. About 40% of pedestrians, 40% of annual fatalities are pedestrians. And that's a stat that's been stable for about 40 years now. That is not new. And it's a legacy problem. Especially before 1994, the road builders were reasonably unconcerned about slapping high-speed roads through the middle of settlements. And if you go and have a look at the legacy of that, when people go and, who live in a settlement where a high-speed road has been built through, want to visit somebody on the other side of the road, it's very rare that safe means to cross that road have been provided, like bridges or tunnels. So what are they going to do? They're going to cross the road and they're going to get hit. But that's only part of the story. The other part is that it takes a vehicle to kill a pedestrian. And when it comes to pedestrian education, it's very hard to reach our pedestrian population because we have low levels of literacy and education in South Africa. Whereas most drivers are educated and they're easy to reach. And it's always been a question of mine why the government isn't going after drivers to educate them better on how to avoid pedestrian crashes.
Yeah. So you're saying a few things. Okay, so we'll park 40% of road deaths are pedestrians. You say already speed limits is the one thing that is actually being policed because it generates income for metros and municipalities. So there are suggestions here on our WhatsApp line, enforce the current speed limit. But you're saying that's already being enforced. So what leads to South Africans being absolutely horrible drivers?
Very straightforward, corruption. If you have a look at the licensing centers, the Special Investigating Unit does regular studies on this. The first one they did in 2000 already, and that study, so that's 25 years ago, in that one they already found that half of the licenses they studied were fraudulent, which means bought, forged, or illegal. And we're not talking small sample sizes here either. That particular study studied 150,000 licenses in Mpumalanga. And every time they've studied it since, they found exactly the same thing. So that means that half of new licenses coming onto our road are being bought. Now, after 25 years, you can reasonably say that that probably means that about half of the drivers on the road have a bought license. Now, being in the industry I'm in, I come into contact with these people and I can tell you definitively that they can't drive. They don't have even physical control skills to a level of a learner driver with 5 or 6 hours instruction, let alone the thinking skills needed to prevent crashes. And it's inevitable in that situation that we see the road safety disaster that we've got.
So then, do campaigns like Speed Kills, does that have any impact on changing driver behavior? Look, fines have made me adapt my behavior, and I think for the positive. I will admit sometimes I have been fined and I pay my fines, and that has changed my behavior. But do the campaigns like Speed Kills, does it change people's behavior in how we use our roads?
Well, there's no evidence that it does. If you have a look at the biggest speed kills, in fact, where it all started in 1998, the launch of the Arrive Alive campaign was based on the slogan, "Don't fool yourself, speed kills." That was the headline. And at that point, the government in totality pivoted towards speed prosecution and speed awareness as their key road safety strategy. And we can look at the statistics they published to see how successful that was. And as it happens, 1998 was the safest year South Africa ever had. By 2006, the fatality rate had doubled. So there's your answer.
Rob Handfield-Jones, MD of driving.co.za.